a part of this important international symposium. Okay. My apologies for this little delay. Okay. Today I will be focusing on looking at armed conflict, weapons proliferation, and women's nonviolent peace movement in the indigenous border territories of Manipur and northeast of India. I would like to pay my respects to the indigenous people of the land where we are in, and to all the indigenous nations in here as well as around the world who are struggling to make our presence and our rights be respected in the wider world. Thousands of people have died in protecting our land and our rights, and we are here carrying the voices of our ancestors and for future generations to come. What I'm going to testify today, please don't consider it as an academic discussion, because for many of us, we can't even, we don't even have the space. The region of India that I come from, called Manipur in northeast of India, our history are not even in textbooks of our country. So we don't exist in the narrative of India. They want our lands, our resources and territories, but they literally want us dead. They don't want us. We are treated as half citizens in the world's largest democracy. So what I'm going to share today, you will not find it in textbooks, you will not find it in university manuals, you will not find it in the museums of our country or even in the world. This is based on 15 years of research, writing, and commitment that we have done to tell stories of our people, because many of our people do not leave our indigenous territories. I am one of the very few ones who have been tossed out of our region because of our political stand and our political work. So these are some of the research findings which I'm going to share. First, what is Manipur and northeast of India? The fabric that you're seeing here, right in front, the long strands, these are hand-woven by the indigenous women of Manipur. What I'm wearing today is not made in China. It's made in the villages of our region. We carry our history on our bodies, in our souls, in our speeches. So what is Manipur? Literally translated, land of jewels. Together with Manipur, northeast of India is home to 45 million indigenous communities. We have 272 groups. This part of India, which is below China, and we are surrounded, 98% of our borders are with 5 countries. We share only 22 kilometers with India in the tiny portion called Chicken Neck Corridor. But 98% of we share borders with, so I grew up in a border zone, as nation states call it. Otherwise, we were not border areas. It's really important to say.
It happened in the California desert nearly 2 decades ago.
Yeah. We are listening. So, and this is also home to South Asia's longest running armed conflict. It's not in Pakistan or Afghanistan that you hear in your newspapers, but conflict in this part of India has been there since 1940s. Currently, there are 72 armed groups in this region, and we have 300,000 troops of the Indian Armed Forces, which are put in our soil to control all of us. And if you only hear of Kashmir, but you will not hear of Manipur and the northeast, where before Kashmir, an Armed Forces Special Powers Act was claimed in our soil since 1958. So for us, India cannot be the world's largest democracy as long as military boots are on our land. Our indigenous territory and borders are heavily militarized. These are pictures of India-Bangladesh border in Tripura, as I mentioned. And then we have next, militarized India, and this is the border of India and Myanmar. So I was born in a region which is just 2 hours away from Myanmar. So while we were talking about this, and I'll just share it. Currently, international relations have defined different types of borders: alienated borders, coexisting borders, independent borders, integrated borders. But that's the Westphalian concept. But for us, we are not borders. Our universe is centered around us. They made us as a part of borderlands which we reject even today. Our lands are very beautiful, as you can see in these pictures. These are areas of Manipur. We are surrounded by 9 mountain ranges and a beautiful emerald green valley. If you look at these people, will you think they come out from Bollywood films, where the concept of India is what you see in Bollywood film, which is spread all over the world, from Africa to Asia to Latin America? Our people look like this. Our language is Tibeto-Burman. It's not Hindi or Sanskrit. We wear sarongs, not saris. We don't eat spices. We flavor our food with herbs. It's a very different type. But now we are asked to be called Indians. So that's why today's presentation is really inspiring, because of the sovereignty question. You talked about lacrosse. Polo is an indigenous game. If you do not know, please know today. 2 places in the world where polo originated has been attributed: Manipur and Mongolia. Polo for us is not a rich person's game played by elites. We have more than 30 polo teams in Manipur alone. It is an indigenous people's game propagated by colonial powers. Today, Indian polo teams do not carry Manipur polo team, saying that it's not polo enough. This is a level which even our games have been relegated. I have proof. This is how we play polo in Manipur. And women even play polo. We have International Women's Polo Team. So indigenous people, we don't live just in jungles. We are not what the rest of our people and community and the colonial governments have told us to be. This is a picture of a book which my father wrote, which chronicled more than 3,000 years of Manipuri history. As we mentioned, Manipur was an independent Asiatic nation state with a 3,000-year-old history. And we were made into a part of India in 1949, a day which we commemorate as a Black Day every year in October 15. So in terms of again, as I mentioned, this part that we are describing is called India's Northeast, a region which is usually seen as a periphery of India, in which we are always told, "Madam, which country are you from?" There's a lot of racism against our people when we go to other parts of India, and it was always told that this region is not civilized enough vis-a-vis the rest of India. And as I mentioned, because of this violence, over 5-6 decades, there's a lot of resistance. And unlike resistance in other parts of the world, some of our groups have taken up armed resistance. Again, whether this is in today's world of after 9/11, where anybody who talked about self-determination or sovereignty is called a terrorist, it's now left to us, what do we do with this? So as I mentioned, many communities like ourselves are sandwiched between what I call the state and the non-state armed groups. And this is an area of work that we got to work deeper into. I am against violence, and I will be till I die. I do not like violence. But I have realized that many of our indigenous brothers have picked up arms in my region. And this makes the situation very complicated when we talk about, because many of these armed groups have also had their own human rights groups who go to Geneva and the UN Permanent Forum to represent their case. And we who are not belong to any armed group go to these forums. We have a tussle with our armed brothers and their representatives. But we are trying to get that space ourselves. On the other hand, our region is heavily militarized. This is how Indian Army patrol in our area. A friend of mine who came from South Africa said it looked like Iraq, the kind of militarization that we have. We are going to end here. So the other thing which I would like to know in terms of borders is that it is not just about our contestation with nation states. Indigenous regions, communities in our parts of the world have also created their own borders. And if another indigenous community confront their borders, we have an intracidal feud happening. This is an example from a Kuki-Naga clash in which more than 2,000 people were killed in the year 1997 to 2000, including 2-year-old children. A whole bus was thrown by a Naga group on a Kuki group where 30 people died over a gorge. I'm telling you, indigenous versus indigenous. And who is responsible? I'm sorry to say, is intelligence agencies of our countries. Because they are, what they do is, when they can confront an indigenous nation state which is strong enough, they arm other indigenous people. And that is happening in India's northeast, a region which in the United Nations, India has refused to accept that there is conflict, there is war, and there's militarization, and which is something that we are trying to do. As a result, and one of the research that I've done in our university here is to map out who's arming and our indigenous territories. Mm-hmm. This is where it's so much connected with the global arms industry. So as indigenous activists and scholars, when we have to talk about bringing our dignity back, we have to confront against a military-industrial complex which has now inundated indigenous territories. We found 58 types of weapons from 13 countries flooding our indigenous border areas. These are the type of weapons. This is an image from Tripura of young men who surrendered their weapons. And these are all indigenous young men who have picked up arms and surrendered. So I have a few more minutes left, but I will focus now on looking at, as a result of this violence, 50,000 people have lost in this conflict, and 20,000 women are widowed in Manipur alone. My work started with helping many women who are survivors of these entrenched political conflict. This is a mother whose 2 sons were shot dead in one day. Some of us are mothers in this room. Imagine losing a child. But 2 of them, Imaj and Rajini, whom I work very closely, these are many women who have lost with pictures of their loved ones. Christoph Heinz was a UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial execution, was not allowed to come to Manipur. So women went where he was, and this is an image of them showing the image of their loved ones. Young men between the age of 17 or 40 are considered as threats to India's sovereignty. So 3 to 4, because of a martial law, anybody could be killed, tortured, or disappeared on mere charges of suspicion. We have many cases of sexual violence in conflict. This is the body of Thangja Manorama, who was killed by 5 Indian paramilitary men who raped and killed her. And I'm going to end with the last few minutes left by showing a clip. I have many things to share, but I will leave it to us. But I want to show this clip, and I hope. And in Manipur, indigenous women and mothers did an extraordinary protest in the year 2000 after the rape and killing of a woman called Thangja Manorama, a protest which shook the entire country. And I would like to spend my next few minutes with this, and I hope I can carry this. Okay. So just give me a few minutes.
Manorama was killed seriously, and we are very shocked. We want to stop raping and to kill the women from Manipur by the security forces.
Mase lao tholo lam theng asi hai ni ko no kulai pai bani ai koi ki isang ata ni adu kulai su pai o hai ni mase dai koi na me sunchen na ga
Think I must do for Manorama and for the women of Manipur. I think the whole night and I did not sleep and wait for Manoramas raping and killing like that.
Madam Lady, there can't you for a photo of being up in the police and your dumb shelly. Otherwise, they don't mean Hana. You need a habit here. Wakanda, in the Rama, you video Japanese.
We never felt any inferiority in our minds. We were proud of our mother and all